Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that when the chapel doors sweep open on that somber afternoon, they will admit grief in its purest form, a vast tide of sorrow that threatens to sweep away every last vestige of hope. Inside, rows of polished pews hold faces drawn tight with tears, and at the very heart of it, Ted Richardson stands beside his daughter's casket, trembling as pent-up anguish pours from him in choking sobs. The flicker of candlelight dances across the carved wooden panels, casting gentle shadows that seem to cradle the mourner's tears. Ted's shoulders heave with each breath. The suit he wears hangs loosely, as though the man himself has shrunk beneath its weight. His eyes, red and glistening, fix upon the ivory casket that bears Kat's name in simple gold letters, letters that feel too small to contain the vastness of the life they represent. He presses a trembling hand to his lips, trying to stem the sob that rises like a guttural plea. Earlier that morning, the air had been crisp and shyly bright, the sun filtering through cloud banks as if uncertain whether to illuminate this house of sorrow. Jacob Hawthorne arrived first, his steps muffled against the stone walkway leading to the chapel. He paused outside the stained glass windows, depicting scenes of redemption, his reflection fractured across the colored panes. Inside, the hush was profound, so complete that each heartbeat seemed audible. Jacob's mind raced with the images of that final confrontation with Leslie Thomas, her cold certainty, the ruthless calculations in her eyes, the whispered threat that Kat's pursuit of truth would not go unpunished. Even now, he could see the flash of her silver cufflinks as she turned and strode away, leaving the weight of her crime unatoned. He slipped into a back pew, shoulders hunched, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. Across the aisle, Nicole Richardson stood stiffly, her face a mask of composed anguish. She clutched a folded handkerchief, her knuckles white, and glanced at Ted as if seeking permission to break. But Ted, lost in a world without Kat's laughter, barely registered her presence. Jacob watched him with a pang of helpless pity. The man had been Kat's anchor, her champion, and now he was adrift in a sea of loss. Jacob had done everything in his power, gathered the evidence of Leslie's misdeeds, presented it to the authorities, urged the hospital board to act, but in the end, justice had come too late. Leslie's elaborate schemes had already felled Kat, and no courtroom victory could resurrect the vibrant spirit that once filled every room she entered. The hush deepened as the officiant, a close family friend whose voice quavered with restrained sorrow, stepped forward. He spoke of Kat's warmth, her fierce loyalty, her unerring sense of justice. He recalled how she had breathed life back into the Richardson legal practice after their family's trials, how her brilliant mind and compassionate heart had steered countless clients through darkness. But of all her accomplishments, it was her role as daughter, sister, and confidant that struck most keenly today. The words floated in the air like delicate petals, each honoring the memory of a woman taken before her time. Every so often, the officiant's eyes swept the congregation, lingering on Ted, whose tears now fell freely, his chin dipping until it rested upon his tied hands. Jacob felt his own throat tighten. He remembered the moment Kat had first confided in him, her trembling voice, as she revealed she possessed the final piece of evidence against Leslie. A hidden recording of Leslie's whispered instructions to manipulate patient data. She'd looked to Jacob for protection, for the reassurance that good men still fought for right. And Jacob had promised her no matter the cost. But cost had been measured in lives, and now Kat's light had been extinguished by the very villain they sought to expose. The injustice made his fists clench. He had to sit through this ceremony, this testament to Kat's life and legacy, knowing that the culprit walked free, at least for now, her crimes still under legal scrutiny but unpunished in the eyes of the law. As the officiant invited family members to share memories, Nicole rose and approached the lectern, her fragile composure masking a fierce determination. She spoke of Kat's laughter echoing through the halls, how a single phone call from her could banish despair, how she had mentored so many young associates into confident attorneys. As she spoke, a hush washed over the congregation. Nicole's voice, steady despite the tears glistening at her lashes, carved a path through grief. She recounted Kat's final hours, her discovery of Leslie's last gambit, the moment she realized the threat was immediate, the look of resolute courage in her eyes. She fought for truth, Nicole ended, voice breaking. And now it is our duty to carry on her fight. Ted's tears fell heavier at those words, and Jacob saw a spark of something in Nicole's gaze, anger, yes, but also a promise of retribution. When the chapel organ swelled on the final hymn, the mourners rose as one, voices trembling before coalescing into a smooth, resonant chord of farewell. Jacob joined in, his own voice raw with grief. As the last notes faded, the congregation filed past the casket, each placing a single white rose atop it, a gesture of both mourning and hope. Ted stood to the side, head bowed, until the final mourner passed. Then he moved forward, hand extended, and laid his rose gently upon the polished lid. He pressed his forehead against the cool surface, tears soaking the lapel of his jacket. The weight of his loss bore down upon him with such overwhelming force that he had to climb onto the platform beside the casket to fully lean into his sorrow. There, tears coursed unchecked, his body shaking as though racked by unseen blows. Jacob stood nearby, feeling the sting of tears in his own eyes, powerless to comfort the man who relied on him for justice. He remembered pleading with Leslie, urging her to come clean, to spare Kat the cost of her vendetta. Leslie had simply smiled, a cruel curve of her lips, and told him that in her world, loyalty and righteousness were only obstacles to be removed. Jacob's jaw hardened. In that moment, he resolved to transform his impotence into action, to ensure that Leslie's reign ended not with a funeral, but with accountability. As the funeral drew to a close, the mourners stepped into the afternoon sunlight, the world outside unchanged in its indifference. The air carried the sense of spring blooms, mocking in their cheer. Ted descended from the chapel steps, supported by Nicole, her arm around his shoulder. Jacob took his place beside them, his brow set in grim determination. They would leave this place soon, but the memory of Kat's life, and the injustice of her death, would guide every step they took toward the truth. And as they walked away, the gates of the chapel closing behind them, the promise of retribution hung in the air, as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. The pall of grief still clings to the Richardsons as they return from the chapel into the gray afternoon light. Ted's arm trembles on Nicole's shoulder, but his gaze is already fixed far ahead, beyond today's sorrow, toward the justice he must secure in Kat's name. Behind them, Jacob Hawthorne gathers the last rosary beads from the chapel steps, each one slipping through his fingers like a silent vow. He will not rest until Leslie Thomas answers for her crimes. That evening, the Richardson drawing room is heavy with candlelight and hushed confidences. Nicole sets a tray of untouched tea on the side table, but none of them feel the urge to drink. Ted settles into Kat's favorite armchair, its cushions shaped by her presence, and unfolds the thick legal brief Kat had drafted before her death. Margins filled with notes in her precise hand, depositions yet to request, witnesses yet to subpoena, lines of strategy to corner Leslie in court. Ted smooths the pages with a shaking hand. She mapped it all out, he whispers. Even then, she planned for today. Nicole kneels beside him, pressing his hand. We'll follow her map, she promises. Step by step. Jacob crosses to the mantel and taps the framed photo of Kat in her graduation robes. She needed more time, he murmurs. More time to expose Leslie. He turns back to Ted. I've already secured statements from the hospital's night shift nurses. Those who saw Leslie slip potassium vials into patient IVs. We'll add their testimony to Kat's blueprint. He pulls a folder from his briefcase, handing it to Ted. And I've traced Leslie's phone records, calls to an offshore lab in Geneva. We need to get that connection on record. Ted nods, a fierce light kindling behind his sorrow. Tomorrow, we'll file the motion to compel international cooperation. Kat would have done the same. Across town, Leslie Thomas reclines in the leather armchairs of her private office, unread messages piling on her desk. News of the funeral and the Richardson alliance flashes through the screens, obituaries praising Kat's tenacity, headlines trumpeting Ted's vow for vengeance. Leslie's smile is tight, her calm veneer intact even as the net tightens. She taps a button on her phone. Marta, prepare the file. I want every dossier we have on Jacob and the Richardson legal team, and arrange a meeting with our Geneva contacts. We can't let those files become evidence. Marta's clipped confirmation echoes through the line. Leslie leans back, the leather creaking under her, and sips scalding coffee. Time to remind them why I'm the one who controls this story. Meanwhile, Eva Thomas sits in Kat's old office at the Richardson building, surrounded by her memory projects, scrapbooks of Kat's life, journals of her own reflections, and the battered journal Clara once brought. She runs her fingers over the spine of Kat's notebook, recalling the final entry. If anything happens to me, Mother, see that they answer for the blood they spilled. Tears well, but Eva straightens. She picks up her phone and dials Jacob. Meet me at the lab tomorrow. I want to see those vials with my own eyes. Her voice, though soft, carries the steel of resolve Kat always admired. The next morning dawns with a thin rain that blurs the skyline. Jacob leads Eva through the sterile corridors of Fairmont Crest Hospital's archival wing. Lab technicians hover at a respectful distance as Jacob unlocks the evidence locker. Inside, black trays hold rows of potassium chloride vials, some bearing Leslie's discreet initials, others marked Project Helix. Eva peers into the freezer's glow and feels the weight of a hidden history pressing upon her. She saw us as lab rats, Eva whispers, anger and grief surging together. Jacob steps beside her. Those vials will speak for you, Eva. We'll catalog every dose, every date, and we'll match them to every victim affected. Eva nods, tears sliding down her cheeks, but her gaze is unbroken. Kat will see this through them. At the Richardson Law Office, Nicole convenes with the public relations team. Press releases must be crafted with precision. Enough disclosure to rally public support, but without exposing Eva or the nurses to unwanted scrutiny. Focus on patient safety, on institutional accountability, Nicole instructs. We want hospitals to quake at the thought of cover-ups like this. The team nods, drafting headlines such as "In the Wake of Tragedy," "Family Demands Reform," and "Doctor's Betrayal," how one woman's ambition endangered lives. Outside, the rain intensifies, each drop punctuating the urgency of their mission. Ted, seated in Kat's chair now, pores over the briefs with Jacob. We'll file the Geneva motion by afternoon, Ted says. And tomorrow, I'll testify before the hospital board's ethics committee. I'll tell them what they already know, that their golden physician betrayed every oath she took. Jacob exhales. It will take everything we've got, but for Kat and for every patient she couldn't save, it's worth it. Across town, Leslie prepares for her own hearing before the hospital board. In her black blazer, she is the picture of composure. Her defense is built on discrediting Jacob's investigation and questioning the reliability of the nurse's memories. She plans to argue that any use of potassium was clinically justified, that no causal link to harm can be definitively proven. But deep down, she knows the Geneva records and lab logs will undercut her narrative. She orders Marta to secure any hidden backups, emails, flash drives, encrypted messages, and to plant disinformation that will muddy the water. They think they can corner me in the cafeteria? She scoffs. I'll drown them in smoke and mirrors. That evening, Ted stands with Nicole on the balcony overlooking the Richardson Gardens. Lamplight glints on rain-slick leaves. She's trying to buy time, Nicole observes. Delaying, obfuscating. Ted grips her hand. We can't let her. We press every front, legal, medical board, public opinion, until she has nowhere left to hide. Nicole nods, her eyes fierce in the twilight. For Kat, they share a silent moment, the legacy of the daughter they both loved binding them in shared purpose. The following day, the hospital board convenes in a mahogany-paneled room. Ted approaches the podium first, voice steady but charged. I come here not only as Kat's father, but as a man who believed in Leslie Thomas's integrity, he begins. His words falter only once before regaining resolve. He lays out the timeline, Kat's discovery of chlorine vials, the nurse's sworn statements, Jacob's forensic analysis, the Geneva lab connections. He concludes, my daughter died because someone placed ambition above compassion. We demand accountability. The board members exchange uncomfortable glances, their notebooks filling with his charge. Jacob follows, presenting the vials and lab reports. He traces Leslie's phone logs to Switzerland, shows emails from her to the offshore lab, and highlights discrepancies in the hospital's inventory control system. One board member whispers, this is systemic failure. Leslie sits poised, offering only a clipped acknowledgement, her expression schooled into neutrality. But when the board chair calls for her response, her composure falters for an instant, a flash of fear or anger, before she replies in carefully measured tones, denying any wrongdoing and citing patient confidentiality. The board murmurs, uncertain which side to believe. Outside, the rain has stopped. Eva waits in the corridor with Clara, Haley, and Kat's former legal associates. When Ted and Jacob emerge, their faces grave yet resolute, Eva steps forward. I want to speak, she says. Inside the boardroom, the chair gestures and Eva enters. She stands before the assembled directors, her voice clear though her heart pounds. My Aunt Kat gave her life to expose these deeds. I am here to finish what she started. No one gets to hide behind a white coat and silence victims anymore. Her words echo in the silent room, and somewhere a window cracks, not in the glass, but in the board's collective conscience. In the days that follow, Leslie's allies in the hospital rush to distance themselves. Internal investigations expand, committees are formed, and the threat of criminal charges looms. Leslie, sensing the tide turning, contacts her Geneva partner in desperation, but the offshore lab cooperates with authorities rather than risk its own closure. Marta is arrested when customs agents intercept an envelope of unreported vials. The net tightens. Back at Richardson and Associates, celebration is muted. A major breakthrough, a freeze order on Leslie's assets and a criminal indictment, is imminent, but the victory is bittersweet. Kat's name still hovers over every meeting, every document. Ted finally allows himself a small smile when Nicole places a hand on his shoulder and says, she would be proud of you. Jacob nods in agreement, glancing at Eva, whose eyes shimmer with both grief and hope. As the rain returns once more to the city streets, the Richardsons and their allies stand united. The fight Kat began continues with renewed vigor. Ted pens a letter to the hospital community calling for sweeping reforms. Nicole organizes a scholarship in Kat's honor to train young lawyers in medical ethics. Jacob readies his final report for the district attorney's office, and Eva, clutching Kat's journal, prepares to tell her own story to any audience who will listen. Late one night, Leslie sits alone in her mansion, the once grand hall now eerily silent. News reports scroll across her screen, indictments filed, board members resigning, patients stepping forward to share their stories. She touches the edge of her desk as if recalling the power it once granted her. But power is fleeting, and tonight she feels its absence keenly. Outside her window, the rain drums a steady rhythm, as if the world itself demands justice. And so, in the shadow of loss and the light of justice, a new chapter begins. The gates that once concealed secrets now stand cracked open. In their wake, Grief has been transformed into purpose and vengeance into reform. Kat's legacy endures not only in court filings and boardroom hearings, but in the hearts of those who refuse to let her fight be forgotten. The road ahead remains steep, but for Ted, Jacob, Nicole, and Eva, every step honors the woman they lost. And carries forward the promise that beyond these gates, truth will prevail.